Rise of Hawk Part 2, Scene 7. Asha's combat boots made echoed footsteps on the dusty wood floor as she paced. Talon lay in the middle of the room on a cot. He was pale and grey, and seemed worse than he had 3 years ago when Asha last saw him. Pacing down the cot towards his feet, she sighed angrily. "I swear if I find this agency spy and the rebels who tipped them off and caused this, I'm going to cut them arse to nostril." "He's Quadzai, correct?" Asha glanced down at the man, sitting with his hands resting on Talon's temples. Hawk had told her quite a bit about him, and that he was an ex-interrogator, but she'd already forgotten his name. She nodded. "Yes." "What were his ratings before this?" His calm grey-blue eyes met her gaze, and she sensed a strong personality behind them. She shrugged. "Zip. He's always been Psylocked, touch-only telepath empath, and an instinct expression of his time psi genes. Why?" "I'm not sure about his other psi abilities, but right now his mind has the reactivity of a level 5 telepath, even while unconscious." "A 5? She gaped. "But that kind of increased so quickly." "Yes, exactly. It's too much. He should already be dead." Her shoulders lifted, and her voice came out like that of a child's. "Can you help him?" He brushed a thread of long blonde hair off his face. "Yes, I think so, as long as he can hold on. I should be able to set up a temporary artificial mental shield for him. That is, of course, as long as the assassin's damage isn't too extensive." She swallowed. "Can I do anything?" "Yes. For now we need a high-rating empath to help shield him. Also, if you have the discipline to remain psychically silent, I'd appreciate you sitting in while I can do what I can. He seems to be more stable with you in the room, but we have to be quick." "Of course. I'll talk to Nama and come back." She stepped towards the door, but looked back over her shoulder at him. "I'm Asha, by the way." "Kita Oran." A friendly smile flashed in his grey eyes for a moment, then it was gone again behind a focused frown. She closed the door behind her and looked through the dimness into the concerned faces of Nama and Nalana. "How is he?" said Nama. Asha wrapped her arms around her middle and swallowed back her tense fear. "The attack seems to have unlocked Talon's psi genes. Kita thinks he's in severe psychic shock. We need Kala in here to help shield him empathically." Nama mirrored his stance and wrapped his arms around his stomach. "How bad is it?" "He said the telepath reactivity is at a level 5. "Mara no then. A 5? Young Nalana frowned. "That's a lot, right?" "Yes. It's usually fatal for any telepath to increase by 3 or more ratings in one go, and he went up by at least 5. He should be dead from telepath increase alone." She swallowed. "And he's Quadzai, so it could be even worse. We just don't know yet." The girl shook her head. "Quadzai? Like me. He has active genes in all 4 psi abilities: telepath, empath, kinetic, and time-sensitive. He's just not been able to access them until now." Nama turned away into the dimness. "I'll go get Kala." "Can I help?" Nalana stepped closer to her. "I can shield empathically." Asha grabbed the girl's hand. "I'll ask, come on." Inside, Kita hadn't moved. He sat on the floor cross-legged, eyes closed with his palms resting on Tay's temples. "Kita, Nala is a healer, but not a telepath. Do you think—" "Yes," he interrupted her without opening his eyes. If she's fast and able to block empathically, I can shield him. His concussion is making things difficult." Nalana let go of her and knelt on the floor next to Tay. She put a hand on his forehead and another on the bruised side of his face. Asha sensed the pulse of something staticky that throbbed through the girl. It started to wash away his physical pain. When the energy stopped again, Nalana stood up to leave, and Asha smiled a gentle thank you at her. On her way out, Nala passed a tall woman with steely strength in her grey-blue eyes, who stood in the doorway. "You're Asha?" Asha nodded. "Kala? It's nice to finally meet you." She gave Asha a tense smile and sat down next to Talon. Asha walked to where Talon's feet were, got into a comfortable meditative position on the floor with her legs folded under her. Taking in a deep breath, she let it out slowly through her nostrils. Her mind reacted instantly by shifting her consciousness slowly down into a half-trance state, where she could sense and watch what was happening without broadcasting anything and harming Talon psychically. Over many hours, Carla and Keita worked on building up Talon's psi shielding as Usher watched impassively. By the time door light flickered through a grubby little window into the room, Carla lay asleep on the floor to one side, and Usher and Keita still sat at the head and feet of Talon's body. There was a pained moan, and Usher dropped out of her trance. "Tay?" she said as she got to her feet. Second groan developed into a word. "Ouch." At Talon's head, Keita opened his eyes. "Don't try to move yet, Talon. You almost died." "What happened? Where? Haran?" Tay's body tensed then his hand lifted to brush at his face. "Oh, my head. Haran, did she..." Usher swallowed. "I'm sorry, Tay. Haran is gone." Perhaps sensing that it was a private moment, Keita got to his feet and left the room. Talon looked sideways at her from the cot, a weak smile lifting into his bruised face. "Usher, you're here." She knelt down next to him. "Yes. How are you feeling?" "Odd," he sighed, and closed his dark blue eyes for a moment. "Migraine, too. How about you?" She laughed. "Fine, I'm just glad you're okay." "Keita and Carla worked all night to save you." Frown wrinkled his brow. "What happened?" "The assassin's attack unlocked your psi genes and put you into a coma. You should have died." He put one broad hand over his eyes. "Awesome." She touched his arm gently and got to her feet. "You rest." "Usher?" She looked down at him over one shoulder. "Yeah?" "I'm glad you're back." A chuckle escaped her. "I missed you too, silly. Now get some sleep." Scene 8. Day 2. Taman. Around lunchtime, Hetera views rebel cell in the southeast of Aram. Hetera brushed a thread of unruly dark hair from her eyes with an irritated flick of her wrist. Her project was almost done, frustrating thing that it was. Sothan Nama and a Sothan lemon shallow, she grumbled wordlessly, and tried to make her fingers do as they were told with a defiantly unruly thread. "They're here, you'd better hurry up," young Geran chortled from the nearby doorway. "Shut up!" Whipping out a backhand, she smacked the twerp a good one upside his head. He let out a rodent-like squeak and skittered out of the room again. Gritting her teeth, she attempted one more focused twist with her fingers. Finally the thread and her fingers cooperated, knotting tightly the last of her slightly crooked stitching. She had worked on the Sothan thing for over a week. She had stolen scraps of leather and PVC from a craft store, even managed to score a metal clasp from a bag in a second-hand shop down the road. Now, finally, it was done. She mentally rubbed her hands together. A bottle of Nama's special limoncello, traded for a strong leather clip bag for his belt. Victory! She grinned triumphantly. Grabbing it off the workbench, she turned to her little son Taman, who sat next to her in his car seat cot. He babbled away at her contentedly, and she touched his little face with one hand. She glanced sideways to double-check that young Gemma was still there, knitting in the corner in the sunlight. Jem would keep a physical eye on Taman while she dealt with the visitors. As she headed back out of the room, she touched the baby's mind with a gentle connection, so he knew she was still nearby. The stock drawers were wide open at the end of the main hall, and people were already ferrying boxes inside from the delivery lane. Nama stood in the entrance, smirking at her. "Do you have it?" His deep voice echoed down the hall. Keeping the clip bag behind her, she approached him, and she grinned. "Do you?" "Of course." His arms widened into a gimme-a-hug gesture. "How are you, Hetty?" Grinning, she stepped into his arms. "Don't call me Hetty." "Why's that, Hetty?" He laughed and let go of her. He was an attractive, tall, broad-shouldered man with the most remarkably golden yellow eyes she'd ever seen, and he smelt good too. But she didn't think for 1 minute of trying it on with him, because he only had eyes for Carla. That, and Carla would likely come after her with a butcher's knife or a 4x2, if she tried anything. Atera gave him a mock glare. "Gimme the sothin shallow." He laughed and flicked his head. "Come on, it's in the van." She followed him outside into the winter sun and down the narrow lane. When she got to Nama's battered white van, she found Talon sitting inside, pushing boxes towards the doors for people to grab. "Hey, Atera." His face was badly bruised around one eye, across the temple and down into the same cheek. The smile was tense but still friendly. She lifted an eyebrow at him. "What on earth then happened to you?" Talon's dark blue eyes were red around the edges, and the moment she saw a line of moisture build up in them, she regretted asking. "Assassin," Nama said quietly. "Hit his base." His voice lifted into a gently playful tone. "Talon got beat up by a kid." "A kid?" She stared back at Tay. "You got beat up by a kid?" He gave her a sad smile. "Yeah, a teenager. She knocked me clean out." She glanced sideways at Nama and spoke telepathically. "Who was lost?" "Everyone," Talon answered her unvoiced question. "Everyone but me, Nala, and the 3 kids." "How did you—" "Trauma triggered a Psygenes." Nama lifted a large bottle of creamy yellow liquid from the van and winked at her. "This telepathic ear's longer than yours now, Hetty." She handed the clip back to Nama and tightly gripped the bottle of limoncello. It was bigger than that agreed upon, but that was all good. There was a sense that perhaps it was inappropriate to grip so strongly to a bottle of intoxicant after hearing such news. Loved ones of both these men had been killed. She also knew that once she started drinking, she remembered that some of those who had been killed were her friends too, and she'd probably get all sombre and sad as well. But for the moment she felt obliged to ignore such strong emotions. "Well, I'm going back inside to get Kitasa face drunk. You're welcome to join me if you like." She turned back towards the stock doors, and Nama's laughter followed after her. "Save some of that. We might come back after the deliveries are done." "Bring your own, I ain't sharing." She stood at the stock doors and lifted one hand from the bottle to wave at them. "Bye." Turning inside, she strode down the hall as Jiran came towards her. The boy was barely 18, a gifted kinetic and an orphan. He had a bit of a mouth on him, but she liked him, despite her gruffness with him. Looking first at the bottle in her arms and then at her, Jiran winked. "Happy now?" She gave him a broad grin. "Yep." He laughed. "Well, stock's been put upstairs in the dry room. I'm on my way up now to help sort it all out. You coming?" "Yeah, I'll just put this away and meet you up there." A touch of mischief crossed through his face, and she sensed he was thinking she'd have a taste test first. She gave him a knowing wink just to encourage the idea. A remnant of the prosperous times before the agency, the building in which they all lived had once been a small department store. The shop front was a vast empty space, cold and impractical to heat because of the high ceiling, so they couldn't really use the room for much, even storage. Instead they lived upstairs, where it was mostly warm and dry in the winter. At the back of the building, on the ground floor, where the only other back door was the sunroom. It had the right amount of windows and walls in fortuitous places to capture and hold a lot of heat and light in the mornings. Consequently, at the times of the month when they ran low on heating supplies, anyone sensitive to the cold hung out there. But often enough it was just her, Gemma, who had arthritis, and the baby. Taman was still wiggling and babbling happily in his car seat cot at the workshop table when she stepped into the room. Gemma looked up from over her knitting and gave her a broad grin. Returning the smile, Atera placed the bottle onto the table and touched Tim's warm face with her hand. He gave her an odd little baby smile and tried to get his mouth around her fingers. He was teething and wanted to chew on everything. There, my little zombie baby. I'll get you something to gnaw on soon." Leaning forward, she kissed his soft hair and lifted the blankets higher around him. She made her way back up the hall, intent on going upstairs. Reaching that end of the corridor, she stopped mid-stride. At the base of the stairwell, near their back door, someone lay on the ground as if they'd fallen. They lay on their stomach, dark hair obscuring the face. There was no heartbeat, but their skin was still warm. Gently, she pushed at their shoulder to turn them onto their side. Her yell of surprise was half choked. It was young Jiran, who was shot in the heart. She hadn't even heard the shot. But even a science weapon could make some kind of noise, I would hear. Her mind grappled with the impossibility of this event for several seconds, and then her practical side won out. It didn't matter how it happened. Someone was inside the building, and that someone was dangerous. She had to call for help. Scene 9. The world was very loud, and Talon's head still ached somewhat. It was like he had a million arms stretched out around him that touched people and absorbed them into him a little of what each person was feeling. Carl had made some kind of barrier so that the sensations were duller, but there was apparently no way to fully block him empathically until he relearned how to do it himself. He rubbed at the pain between his eyebrows with a knuckle. "You've got to think like you speak," Nama continued telepathically as Tay tried to focus on the lesson. "Has to be with words. You can be loud or quiet, short or long distance, open or private band, and you've got to become aware of how strong you're pushing, because you can hurt people. Right now you're so loud you're making my ears ring." He imagined himself whispering, "How's this?" Nama's face twitched, and Tay sensed a flare of irritated pain. He sighed. "Sorry." "You'll get it." Tay turned in his seat to look behind him. A sensation of desperate fear came towards them and transformed into the odd shimmering silver call of Hetera's mind energy. "Nama!" The voice was so loud it seemed to distort and echo in Talon's ears, and he flinched. "We need help. Come back." Nama pulled the wheel and the van spun around into a U-turn, nearly lifting 2 wheels off the road. "We're coming. What's wrong, Hetera?" "There's an assassin here. Abekashan. I can't find them. It's like they're invisible. I have to get Taman." Her voice and mental presence cut off with a twitch of burning pain. "Haida. Tay, you got a weapon on you?" Tay dove into the pocket in his jeans and brought out his father's service weapon. "Yep." Their van skidded around another corner, crossed the median line and dove up onto the footpath. They came to a stop and a screech of brakes and smoke at the front entrance of a terrace building. Without pausing, Nama got out of the van, went straight to the building entrance and kicked in the door. They entered what had once been the shop floor. Sunlight pushed through gaps in the mucky panes above them and cut white lines in the dust and rubbish on the cracked lino floor. They ran across the room to a man who lay on his back and was splayed out like a scarecrow. His gun lay next to one hand, with the safety still on. There was a distinctly surprised expression on his face, and a bullet hole through the middle of his forehead. Staring at the surprised expression, Tay swallowed. "Just like Anna." Next to him, Nama swore under his breath. Together they approached the open door leading into the hallway, which bisected the entire building. They stopped on the threshold to listen. It was far too quiet. "I can't hear anyone," whispered Nama. Talon looked down at the floor and listened to his new senses. "I think I can." Something niggled at him off to his left. He followed it down the hall, away from Nama. He wasn't sure what he was sensing. It was pain and fear, but it was overlapped by an odd contentedness as well as an icy kind of tension. Tay stepped in through the doorway and stopped. Hetty lay on the floor to his right. She was alive but terribly injured. Baby Tim sat in his car seat cot on a table, and in front of the baby stood the assassin girl from last night. Her gun was aimed at the baby's head, but Taman gripped the barrel with his little hands and was trying to suck on it. She glanced over her shoulder. For a second he and the assassin blinked at each other in surprise. Then she seemed to recover from her shock and lifted the weapon from the baby to bear down on him. He hit the floor as a muffled shot went off in the room, and Tay heard feet retreat outside. Nama came into the room behind him, and getting up on one arm, Talon pointed to the back door. "That way, same girl from last night." "She's got Tim." The terror lay on her back next to him, blood all over her. "I'll get him, Hetty. I'll get him back, Hetty." Gripping his weapon, Nama ran out after the assassin. Tay knelt down next to her. He was afraid to touch her because it might cause him pain, but she was bleeding and needed pressure on her wounds. Gritting his teeth, he put his hands firmly down on the bullet wound in her chest, and they both cried out in pain. The magnifying feedback from her body through his touch sense and his non-touch senses was agony, but he refused to let go of her. She killed everyone. She'll kill Tim. Nama will get her. Just relax. Stay with me. The children. Her mental voice was weakening. They're hiding in. The pain from her eased away, and under his hands her breathing stopped. He sensed the silvery energy that was her Terabue blow away like sand in a storm. No! Talon closed his eyes. No, Hetty. Footsteps came towards him. Lifting his gun with bloody hands, he looked into Nama's face over the barrel. They stared at each other for a moment. Taman? Nama shook his head. She got away. Hetera? Gone. He lowered his weapon. Nama swallowed, and Talon sensed him suppress his grief. Come on. We'll have to check for survivors. I'll call in reinforcements. Talon got to his feet again. She said the other children were hiding somewhere. Maybe we can find them. He tried to wipe his hands on the dark pant legs, but Hetera's blood was already drying and clotted on his skin. I'll start upstairs. Nama turned off to the left. You find anyone, practice your whispering and call me down. Right, he whispered mentally. He heard a sigh. Your volume, Tay. Still yelling even if you use a husky voice. Tay stood in the doorway and watched Nama check a body at the base of the stairs and then step over them. He felt utterly heart-struck and defeated. The girl, it was the girl again, and she'd taken out a second rebel cell within 24 hours. They couldn't stop her. He couldn't stop her. This cell was a large one with nearly 30 adults, and they could all be dead. He closed his eyes to push away the grief and helplessness. From somewhere else in the building, a niggling, washed-out fear called out to him. It was so very dim, but it had direction. He turned to his right, walking slowly and listening to that quiet tendril of terror. Mama, grizzled the little person. No, you have to stay here, an older one replied. There were voices of children, and they were really close, but at the same time 3D and patchy. There were no doors nearby, but the left wall was closer to the faded voices than the right. He put a bloody hand to the wood, and the children's fear pulsed into his mind. Through the wall he felt the lines of framing, where natural fibres met nails and metal bracing. The spaces between the wood and metal, however, were filled with something black that absorbed his senses. Despite the dark fuzz, he saw that the lines of framing wrapped a box shape around the children, and on the other side of the box was a door that stood in the front of the building. The children's terror pulsed at him through the wood. He had to tell Nama that he'd found them, but he didn't want to yell. He looked back up the hallway anxiously, then at the wall in his hand. Perhaps the dimness of the children's voices was what Nama meant by volume. But if that was the case, it was more like emphasis than volume today. Stretching out towards Nama, Talon carefully made the emotion behind the words almost nothing. Nama? There was no sense of pain in his old friend. I found the children. Through the mental contact he sensed that Nama's mind and heart were an ocean of barely contained, burning grief. Where? They're in a cupboard. They're okay? Talon swallowed. Yeah, I think so. That's good. Everyone else is dead.